Everybody, it's Annette from the Art of Intuition. And today, I actually had a totally different topic in mind when I was getting dressed. And then I was like, no, I want to do this one. So I'm going to pivot. We're going to talk about outrage. And what is outrage? Why it's playing so much into the collectives, and what actually is fueling a lot of the outrage, and how we can start to flip that. Now, flipping this does take it usually takes baby steps to start to flip things, especially things we have attachment to, right? When we have attachment to stuff, we don't flip as quickly, we don't flip as easily. But before I get into that, I do want to mention our new community page. It is on Substack. The links are going to be below. I got a lot of courses up now. A lot of it's populated at this point, so a lot of the newer content is going to be over there, not over here. There will be some stuff over here, but not as much. So I do urge everyone to go over there so we can kind of get that community more up and going. So anyway, that is going to be much of my focus for 2026. So you'll see a little bit less over here, and instead of it being 80% over here, 20% somewhere else, it's probably going to be 80% over there, maybe 20% everywhere else. So just to give everyone a heads up. All right, outrage. Why are we outraged? What is outraging everybody, and how do we shift it? There's so much going on in the collectives and so much going on in our own. You can look at it on a macro level and a micro level. Sometimes it's easier to look at it on the macro level first because you don't have the attachment to it. When you have a really strong attachment to anything on the macro level, like anything that's happening to people you don't know, anything that's happening to people you've never met, anything that's happening to people that's trying to think of another way to put this, where you don't have a physical daily human connection with, right? You don't know these people, you don't know what's going on with any of these people, but you're outraged by what has just happened, or you're outraged with this is going on, and you see it all over right now. It means you're attached up to that collective. So in your DNA, you're attached to that collective. And even though you don't have what you would call a connection to any people involved in it, you're connected through them by the collectives, okay? That's why we say all the collectives have to move forward, because our individual journeys can't go forward unless the collectives do. We still have it in our body. We might not have that visceral reaction to things because we've cleared enough of that in our own body, but we still need the collectives to clear it so we can finish our clearing. That's why we might clear something, and then maybe years later when we start seeing the outrage in the collectives, we'll feel ourselves going through it again on a different level, and we might even think, wow, I thought I was done with that. You were done with it on a micro level, but you weren't done with it with the collective level. So the collectives had to start to clear it so then you could finish your clearing. Sometimes you get emotions with that, sometimes you just get sick with that. Like your body will have physical symptoms because you're trying to purge it from the body. So when you see this on a macro level and all of a sudden you're getting really outraged, and you see it like it's all over the place right now. Doesn't matter what side, and everyone's kind of picking sides. It's a very, I don't want to use the word bipartisan, but it's almost like everyone's kind of splitting off, right? And it's everyone against everybody else. There's no really community in much anymore. Or it's just a community in the people that agree with you, right? And if it's not, you're against, Now, there's a reason that's playing out. One, it's got to move everybody forward, and it's getting the outrage out. The collectives are moving through outrage, but they're doing it in the more visceral way. They're doing it in a more physical way than you do it once you get to certain parts of your awakening and your ascension, where you're doing it in a more energetic way. Even if something physically might happen, you have a conscious awareness of what you're doing, where that's lacking in a lot of what goes on now. There's no conscious awareness to it. It's just a reaction, So, when you start reacting, you have technically gone unconscious again, or you have not achieved a certain amount of consciousness. Now, we're not doing this to say this person's conscious. It doesn't matter. Everyone's where they're supposed to be, and everyone's playing into the role they're supposed to play into. This is just for you to get an idea of when you react to something, or when we react to something, where is that coming from? Why am I so mad about that? Why is that bothering me? I had not cared anything about politics for years. In the last election, I definitely found myself pulling in one way or the other. which was weird to me because I thought I cleared that stuff a long time ago, that separation. But when the collectives went through it so polarized and so strongly, I felt I got dragged back in a little bit because it was still in my body. I didn't so much have a massive connection to it, but I did. It was a more of, I could feel it. I could feel me wanting to go one way or the other, It's like, and even if I wasn't sure in that moment which way was highest line, I had an emotional pull to it, right? And one thing we have to always be able to go back to is that it's all a contract, okay? It does not matter what is going on. It does not matter who is involved. It does not matter where it is taking place. It's a soul contract involved in this transaction. Everything is under a contract, okay? That person was supposed to be in that place. That person it was supposed to happen that way. This person was supposed to do this to this person. It's just like when it happens in our micro realities. In our reality, we can say, okay, well, this person had a contract with me to do this, right? But sometimes it works both ways. Sometimes we can look at the macro level and understand it more and then bring it back to our life and sort through and pull our lives and our realities apart a little bit and say, okay, I understand that. Let me take that to if I can distance myself and see it from a different consciousness in the macro perspective, can I do it in my world where I'm attached to these things? And sometimes it works the opposite, where we have such a strong connection to that collective that we forget all the things we've learned in our little macro existence. But out there now, oh no, it doesn't work like that out there. This is all off the chain out there. This is not like my little world over here where we had a contract. These people don't have contracts. Everyone has a contract. Everything that's happening is all scripted, okay? And I don't mean scripted in the, it's kind of a dual meaning there. I don't mean scripted in the, what is the word? Oh gosh, I can't think of the word now. Conspiracy theory. It's all scripted on a soul level. Nothing can play out that everyone did not agree to ahead of time. So when you see people outraged by this, outraged by that, they're working through the outrage. Can you take that and start peeling it apart? Can you start to shift the story? No matter how horrific your human consciousness thinks it is, even your soul, how much you could feel it from the depths of your soul. Can you now take it and start to flip it? In a sense of understanding, why did it have to go down that way? Why did that have to happen? It seems like that made everything worse in our human condition, in a sense, Our human's going to look and go, everything got worse. This is awful. This happened the way this has just happened. Can we then take it back and say, okay, let me see, what is the benefit on a soul level of it happening that way? What is the benefit of that going down that way? Why would these two souls have agreed to this? What is the benefit? Especially the bigger it is, the more it impacts the collective, the more it shakes the collective, the bigger the, I don't want to say bigger the agreement because they're all just as massive, whether it's in your macro or your micro life, macro or micro level, it doesn't matter. But it was a huge impact. Why would they agree to do it? Why would they agree to this level of service? Is another way to look at it. Thank you for your service. No matter what side did what, it doesn't matter. They both were in service to humanity to push everyone forward. Even in the moment, it doesn't feel like it does. I feel like it made it all worse. It made it more chaotic. It made everyone more angry. That's the point. There's a zillion points. That's one of the points. Now people are more pissed off. So now you're going to see more people reacting to burn through more of their programming and push the collectives farther quicker, right? Because of what played out over here, and why this played out over here. And sometimes if we start to write it down and can say, okay, what has happened with that? I was watching a show, I think it's based on a Stephen King novel about this guy who goes back in time and tries to stop certain events from happening, right? Because if this didn't happen this way, then everything would be so much better. And there's this person pushing against the guy, saying, no, you're not supposed to be in this time. And the past, they keep saying, the past is pushing back. The past does not want this changed. It has to go down this way to lead to this. You think you know better. You think if you change this one thing, everything is going to be moonlight and roses on the other side if this didn't go down this way. This had to go down this way to push everyone down a path that might feel uncomfortable, but it's the one they have to go down because it's the quickest way for their enlightenment. It's the quickest way to their awakening. It's the quickest way to clear that programming for that collective. It might not be the comfortable way for someone to witness. It might not be the comfortable way for our human consciousness to look at it. But that does not mean, we get this confusion that highest aligned means comfortable for a human. It means no stress for a human. It means no fear for a human. Yes, it's you'll see it flipped and say, well, it's the easy way. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but it is the quickest way. It is the best way to get to where you're going. You just can't see the whole way yet. Or even if you can see the whole way, sometimes we're so mad about it. I wish it didn't have to go down that way. I wish it could have been a different way, but where everyone was in that moment, there was no other way. But when we're still assigning blame, our human's going to always assign blame. Okay, the human wants a victim, it wants a perpetrator, it wants to be mad at one side, it wants the other side to be mad at the other side, it wants everyone pitted against each other, because when everyone's pitted against each other, yes, it's working through programming, yes, it might be the only way for that collective in that moment to do it, but it's still kind of a stall game. It's still a slower way to go. Can we back up and look at it? Can we get to that place and say, wow, this was their service to humanity. Thank you for your service. No matter, it doesn't matter. And if you go back and even go, can you take another step up in consciousness and look at it and go, okay, well, we've all been in every side of this. We've all been the bad guy. We've all been the good guy. We've all been on one side. We've all been on the other side. We've all been every race. We've all spoken every language. We've been every religion. In every multidimensional existence we have going right now, because we're going to get out of the past. That was my analogy, but I don't really like to bring in time. We just get rid of all that stuff. None of that shit matters, okay? Can we take a step and look at it from, this was the contract. I might not like the contract. I might not like the chaoticness, but through chaos comes the shifting. If you look at it to take it back to your life, were you going to shift anything if everything stayed hunky-dory and perfect in your human existence? Why would you? That's why no one's going to leave a human existence if it works for them in any way. If it's working for them in 1% of the way, they're not going to leave, okay? They're not going anywhere because it's still working. If it's working, they're not going to move. We weren't going to move either. It could be working in the most effed up way, but as long as it's working, dude, I'm staying right here because this is still working on some level. So I'm going to just plant myself right here. I'm going to just nest in like a cat's going to nest in. I'm going to nest in right here and I'm going to wait. Because maybe it'll turn around. That's a human mantra. It's got to get better. This is going to shift around another way. It'll shift around and stab you in the back in a different direction, but it's not going to kind of get better. Because the human realities aren't meant. You can't win. You can't win those realities. They're not set up to win. They're set up to push you forward. You might have the illusion you won something somewhere along the way, but they're to push you forward. They're not to give your human. We have this other misconception that our highest line realities is everything our human wants. It's got zero to do with what your human wants. And you can see how that's playing out in the collectives right now. No matter where you stand, no matter what collective you feel, and you can feel it. You can still maybe feel it. Even if you feel like I've cleared it, I'm not super emotional about it, but I can feel a pull one way or the other. I can still sit there and go, yeah, I kind of can feel I was hooked up to that collective. And it's still in my body somewhere, because I can still, if it gets really polarized, you can kind of feel the pull. You can feel the cord. You can kind of feel that cord. Everyone wants to know what's a cord, how do I know if I have a cord of attachment? Where do you feel pulled to? Where is it when it gets polarized? And sometimes it has to get super polarized right now to drag all of us who have maybe gone through some of this stuff earlier, to clear it from our bodies. It has to get so polarized, so against. Everything is against. Nothing is for anymore. And even when you see it trying to be spun for, this is for this, there's still not a pure agenda for anyone in the whole thing. Because our human consciousness does not have pure agendas. It can't have a pure agenda. It's not able to have a pure agenda. But that doesn't really mean that person is just in a human consciousness. So were all of us at one point. That's how we started. Yes, some people might come in a little more perceptive than others, but nobody came in conscious. I can tell you that right now. No one came in, let me flip that. Once you went through certain parts of being a baby and started growing up, you go unconscious. That's the human experience. That's a human experiment. If you're more in your galactic phases about looking at it, no one is. Some people might be a little more enlightened than somebody else. They're just a little more connected, but they're not conscious, okay? Until you go through certain things, your awakening, your ascension, to get you to a more conscious level. You know, none of us came in and we're like, ooh, because we would have been miserable. You know, we would have been absolutely miserable if we came in like that, because the separation is so intense, and the cutting off, you know, of how we really, our natural way of being is so abrupt. It's a miserable feeling. And, you know, you can see some of that when you look at different, you know, what a human would say it's a mental illness, you know. It's just the veils they're not there, you know, they're not set in place, you know, they're all over the place. And you can't tell what reality is what. That's why ascension will go slow, has to go slow to a certain point. And that's why you'll see, you know, we can still, and if you could take it back to your life and look at, okay, how am I going through something? Am I trying to fight my way through it? In a sense, am I getting in this reality and trying to change it from within, or am I just leaving it behind? There are some people supposed to be in there and duking it out, you know, and there's some realities in the beginning we're supposed to be in there and duking it out too, and that's how we learn to speak up for ourselves. It's how we learn to stand up for ourselves. It's how we learn to get into our power, to get into reality and say, no, this is not okay, right? But there also comes a time when you get past that you also understand the quickest way to weaken a collective is to leave the collective. Leave it behind. And then there's no one there for anyone to pull on anymore, because there's nobody there. You look around the party and there's nobody in the room with you anymore. Everyone's gone. You walk out. You left. You can look at realities you left behind, and it might still be going on in the sense people might go, hey, why don't we ever see you anymore? Because you left the reality. You left the reality. You left that little mini collective you had going. You walked away. Because that's what we're supposed to do. Okay. I'm going to cut it there. Keep practicing the art of intuition.